So I wanted to do a video to talk a little bit about the throat chakra, since this is one of the energy centers that I work on frequently with my clients. So the throat chakra is referring to the throat center, and this is the center of communication and expression, as well as creativity, but mostly expression. And how do you know if you are having an issue with your throat chakra? Well, there's a number of different things that you might notice with this particular center. So, if you have a hard time speaking up, and you might already know, well, I already have an issue expressing myself, I have an issue in public speaking, I have an issue in confrontation, or even expressing to someone how I feel or what I'm really thinking. So sometimes you might even have like a physical sensation that you're being choked. A lot of times people will say that they have like a lump in their throat if it's their turn to speak, or even if it isn't their time to speak, but they're wanting to say something, someone else is saying something to them, and like immediately it feels like their throat is closing. I hear that a lot. There's also like someone might need to be clearing their throat all the time. Actually, even coughing. The metaphysical reason for coughing is trying to draw attention to either themselves or something that it is that they need to say. Sometimes people feel like they have some, like the frog in their throat, or they suddenly get really, really hoarse. So people who really kind of try to keep their feelings and their thoughts to themselves oftentimes have sore throats or hoarseness for no apparent reason. Now the other thing is, let's say you do express yourself, but are you using a lot of sarcasm? Are you defensive all the time? Do you always feel like you have to convince people of that you're right, or of what it is that you're saying? Like you just feel like you need to do that. Are you always arguing? Do you find that you're constantly finding yourself in fights or debates all the time? So there can be different extremes at either end. Like either you don't say anything, or sometimes you might be saying a lot, but it's not really causing a productive communication between you and other people. You might even be interrupting people all the time. You might talk excessively loud. Okay. Conversely, there's people who talk super softly, or they may need to be repeating themselves, like someone has to constantly ask them to speak up. So there's a lot of different things that you can kind of discern when it comes to your communication, not even so much the style, but like your delivery. So pay attention to that, because there's a reason why you might be communicating the way that you are, maybe a reason why you're not communicating at all. And the reasons for those things, of course, can vary depending on what wounds there were to begin with that could have contributed to that. So, like I said, I work a lot with my clients on this. And one of the suggestions that I always give is, if you have a hard time expressing yourself, or let's say just even kind of asking for what you want or what you need, start with things that are really insignificant. And start with something like super easy, like saying, if someone asks you, what do you want for dinner? What Here's a good example. What a lot of times, what do we normally say? We say, oh, I don't care, whatever it is that you want. But is that really the truth? Like, then someone gives their suggestion, you're like, oh, well, I don't really want that. So let's say, for example, you wanted pizza. What's the worst thing that can happen if you say, well, actually, I'm craving some pizza tonight? What's the worst thing that can happen? Is you don't get pizza, right? And what if you do get what you want? Then it's kind of like, oh, well, I actually said my truth. I actually said what I really, really wanted, and I got it. So remember that, communication is so incredibly vital. We often would like to think that if people know us pretty well, that they can kind of read our minds or that they would automatically give us what we want, and that's not true. It doesn't even matter how long someone has known you. If you don't ask, you're not going to receive. If you don't speak up, no one's even going to know that you exist. So we're not talking about, like the major things that may need to be expressed. When you're learning how to make good use of your throat center, start with something small, and that's usually the suggestion that I give at first, especially for people who are extraordinarily timid and just not used to it. Use every opportunity that you have, because they're going to come up, whether that's in your family life at home, with your friends, at work. There's going to be an opportunity for you to say something, for you to be able to express yourself in a way that you have a presence. Okay, now we have an energetic presence anyway. It's not like people won't notice if you're not necessarily in the room all the time, but it's just that when you say something, and when you express who you are, what you're thinking, what you're feeling, that is when you can start to create stronger connections with people. That's when you can have a greater impact. And it's so important, because if we never, ever, ever speak up, we're always going to be regretting. We're always going to feel like I should have expressed my feelings. I should have said, to this person how I felt about them or what I thought. Or we're going to end up in situations that we don't really want to be in because we just kind of went along. It's different, when we kind of go, oh, well, I just kind of go with the flow. There's a certain kind of, surrender and element of flow when you say that. However, that's not what we're talking about here. We're not talking about just kind of rolling with the punches. We're talking about being able to express yourself so that way you take part in the unfolding of your life and the creation of your reality, and having the best interactions and connections in your relationships, and being able to feel confident and assertive and like you're able to stand up for yourself. You have to stand up for yourself at all times. And I know it's not an easy thing. It took me a really long time, almost 40 years, to be able to do that. Okay, like in my mid-30s is when I actually started. And, and now I'm 41, I'm going to be 42 this year. It's never too late. But it's so incredibly important to do that, because you will feel like you're staking a claim in your life. So it's important. And when I see my clients standing up for themselves and really speaking up for themselves, they change. They light up. They feel so good about themselves. And even people experience physical changes. I've had, someone say how, they have a thyroid condition, and the markers in their blood work actually improved after they started speaking up. So it's quite interesting how when we start to stand up for ourselves and take responsibility for how we are presenting ourselves to the world, our lives can really, really change, and it can take on a whole new meaning. You can feel like you can find your purpose. You can feel like you are actually seen, and that's really, really important. So I hope that was helpful information. Feel free to reach out to me with any questions, and I will see you next time.